until now as the first two presentations. So don't expect too much technical information. We're going a little bit into the dreamland of engineers. So, just on my person, my name is Jochen Kaiser. I'm from Bauhaus Luftfahrt. We are a very small research institute based near Munich. We were founded about 15 years ago by the state of Bavaria and several companies, just to have a research institute which is looking into the far future. So not like DLR and others doing practical work. We try to look far beyond the normal technical development cycle of companies. And that's part of our far away. Otherwise, we are called some think tank, so just the typical modern words for this. I worked many years for Airbus in the development, pre-development on new aircraft concepts, and switched to Bauhaus a few years ago to take over the technical part. So, why do we talk about hydrogen and everything else? So, as presented before, that was a very good remark on sustainability. We have a problem in aerospace, aeronautics, with CO2 emissions. CO2 emissions are growing in aerospace every year, so we have 4-5% growth per year. The overall part that aerospace is taking into CO2 emissions is just about 2.5% of the global CO2 emissions. So not very much. Everybody would be happy. We are below covered, but it's more than 2.5%. We are up to 4 to 5%, I would say, in reality, when we take into account any kind of radiative forcing effects of water we emit into the atmosphere. So this is making aviation even worse, and it's rising every year. So we are not decreasing our CO2 emission in aviation, it's rising, and others also decreasing their emissions. Maybe in a few years we would get a problem in the public. Already today, you know the naming in German Flugscham, the English expression at the moment. But people are looking more on CO2 emissions and on climate effects of aviation. And that's also seen in the aviation industry. Most of you might know, ATAC, there's a clear goal by the industry to reach the 2050 goal to have 50% of the 2005 CO2 emissions, even though Corona is already included here. Everybody has expected short downward, but in the end, CO2 emissions will rise anyhow. And there's even a clear target by the European Commission to reach net zero emission by 2060. So that's even much more harder than the 2050 goal. Technically, we have seen already sustainable aviation fuels. They shall bring quite a lot of this benefit. If possible or not, we'll have to see. It's more a matter of producing the stuff at the moment. We can do quite a substantial part with operations and infrastructure. So just trying to reduce flights, reduce unneeded kilometers, and try to save something there. And of course, all the technology-driven parts. So in the last years, mostly done by engine suppliers. There was the biggest part in saving fuel. It was always a typical. Sorry?
The question: where do these figures come from?
Which question?
Who initiated the study?
It's ATAC, it's one of the industry organizations, but also IATA and what's the ICAO is within there. So these are big foundations. You can find several different graphs like that, but they all end up with similar numbers. It's just, yeah. Here you can say a lot of these technology things were always driven by reducing cost. So if you use less fuel, you reduce your cost. In the airlines, that's the biggest topic. Most of the reductions over the last 20 years were just out of cost reasons. This is changing at the moment. That's why we can talk about different things. Offset is also a small gray part, was mentioned in the presentation before. We're not sure if this is really the right way just to make some greenwashing. So, how can we fight CO2 emissions? As presented before, engines, they are one of the major topics. I won't go very much into it. There are a lot of concepts on more radical engines out there. Everybody is working on it because this is a thing we can introduce rather quickly. Other things, you can see a lot here on the AERO. Everything was electrified and hybrid systems. Interesting, but might not be the solution for the big air transport in the end. We're looking quite a lot in synergistic propulsion and airframe integration, so how to integrate the propulsion systems better into the aircraft. And the last part, which was part of the title, how's hydrogen going into this game? So let's start with hybrid and fully electric things. I mean, the electric flying is great. Everybody who had the chance to do flight with a purely electric powered aircraft, that's really fantastic, makes fun. Very high efficiency on the energy side. But as soon as you try to scale it up into an aircraft for passenger transport, and this was a concept more than now 10 years ago done by Bauhaus Luftfahrt, to see could we scale it up and what would it mean to scale up an electric aircraft passenger flight. It works, yes, no problem, weight, everything can be done even if it's not that fancy wing. But the battery energy density, that's the main problem. For aircraft with 180 or 200 passengers, we would have to go up to 2,000 watt-hours per kilogram on batteries. And this is not foreseeable at the current state. Battery technology is developing, yes, but here we are even outside of the chemical range. So quite a lot are talking about hybrid electric. You can see also a lot of concepts here on the AERO. First, one thing, mechanically integrated, so parallel hybrid. So you have an engine and just a standard gas turbine or everything else, and you have an electric motor. Typical thing. We have also done what we call trade studies. It's typical what we do. We don't go into hardware at Bauhaus. We just try to figure out, is a concept possible or not? And typical ways of looking at this, so we have the change of block fuel, so the fuel you need for an aircraft. It's an aircraft around a typical A320 size, and the required battery energy density over the range, and of course, yeah, other numbers are maximum takeoff weight, but this is not that important. But what you can easily see after looking into the data. If you want to fly 500 nautical miles with such an aircraft, with a hybrid aircraft, with AC-20 size, you need also very good measuring still. So we thought this is not the way to go for big aircraft. Smaller ones might work perfectly, and I think this is the way to go. But for big aircraft, we have to look deeper into other solutions. One thing that is done on both sides of the Atlantic is parallel serial hybrid. So you have the standard engines and you put on an additional electric or mechanical powered, fan. It's less for producing power or propulsion for making the aircraft faster. It's more or less to reduce the weight of fuselage. So this is to reduce the overall amount of energy you need for longer ranges. Some call it just weight filling propulsion. And this is especially when you come the former concepts done by NASA and European research projects were integrating a gas turbine into the fuselage and having a fan rotor. When you switch to electric engines, it makes life much easier. You could have a very small propulsor in the far end of the fuselage. Works. Fuel reduction potential depends on the study you see, 5 to 10, 11, 12%, depends on the number of people want to read. But still, we are not without any CO2 or anything else. And this is the problem for especially long range. And there we took a deeper look into, because long range is just providing 10% of passengers worldwide. But it reduces 35% of global air transport CO2 emissions. And what makes it even more special, there's no alternative for air transport there. Anything else on short distance, we could switch to other transport modes. But flying long distances, there's no alternative. And that's why we said, okay, let's have a look what can happen there. The aircraft builders at the moment don't like to look really into long-range market. The aircraft like A350 and 787, they're rather young, and they still want to produce them for a long time. Fine, but our world is to look into 30, 50 years time horizon. So on 3 parts, business model, just a very short thing. When you look at the long-range market, most people are flying today indirect. So you produce additional kilometers, additional flights, because either there's no direct flight, or in most cases, it's just cheaper. That's the airline model. You want to get additional passengers by transferring people to your hub in your country, even if it produces additional flights. So this is one thing where we said, why not going back into direct connections? You can see it when we've done this, it was before Corona. And in the meantime, big aircrafts have left the market. We see much smaller.
There's a closely difference between the Airbus and the
Yes. That was the hub idea. Yeah. Point-to-point came up, but it's still a lot of airlines using the hub model because they are these legacy airline models, and they want to get passengers.
I think there's one airplane that is changing a little bit short time in the game, and it's the A321 XR.
Yes.
Yeah, that does a long haul efficiently, direct.
This is Eco Class 6 seats.
Yes.
Which is a complete connect.
but it's the one that changes the mix.
Yeah. So it was already interesting to take a look at it. The other thing is what kind of energy could we use for it? And we had long discussions within our institute because we have people, our CEO, he's a professor, he knows everything about aircraft, and everybody said, never ever hydrogen. It was before the hype started. But when you look at this on small graph, you have the emissions, specific ones. Of course, conventional jet fuel, rather high. And you have all the different alternatives which are under research or under even production today. All the biofuels, they produce less CO2, but most of them are much more expensive. That's also a problem. Conventional kerosene, even after the actual price, is still rather cheap compared to all the sustainable fuels. But we see the potential of having very low CO2 emissions, but high cost. These are the typical, they're called power to liquid or sunlight to liquid fuels, which can be produced with low CO2 emissions, but yeah, still lacking the amount that is needed for aviation. And when you look into the production cycle for it, every time hydrogen is produced on the way. If you produce any kind of power to liquid, you normally go by hydrogen. So why not use it directly? That was the question we took. Hydrogen is nice stuff, much more energy per mass, per kilogram, than classical kerosene. And if you burn it, it has already low emissions, and you get much less when you go down to fuel cell use. So sounds nice for flying. Yeah, you can see the Vector is 5 times more the value compared to kerosene. So space is always a problem on aircraft. We have to fit it into the air vehicle. You have a lot of water vapor when you burn hydrogen. Not when you use it in a fuel cell. You produce water, yes, but then you have to handle it. The most important thing in our point of view is you introduce a complete new ecosystem in the fuel landscape. So all the systems on ground, on aircraft, all the infrastructure you need, you have to build it up again. Everybody is just living with kerosene today. So you have to produce hydrogen, the green one, hopefully. You have to transport it. You have to make it in a liquid state, which also takes a lot of energy. So this seems to be the biggest hurdle for me, for hydrogen in the end. But it's a typical Bauhaus topic, just to try to make a concept out of it and see what hurdles, what big steps are still to be handled in the future. So we ended up trying to make an aircraft cabin design. First, a little bit of history on hydrogen. Already the first working gas turbine from Heinkel, made by Oheim, was running on hydrogen before he managed to use a liquid fuel. Later on, there were flight tests in the 50s in the US with first hydrogen. Well, the engine ran about 20 minutes overall. And the famous Tupolev, today in the museum, was the only really flying jet until today with hydrogen. There was a big study, beginning of 2000, trioplane by Airbus. Many of the today's used data for hydrogen aircraft are coming out of this study and also out of this area. Technically, very good study, showed technically it can work, but at that time, no chance to build it out of money reasons. Normal kerosene was much cheaper. But later on, switch, we could see it's downstairs here, and one about the H2Fly aircraft, a lot of concepts, and it's a little bit of hype going on with hydrogen now. Everybody's presenting studies, so rather interesting for us since it's that fast. Yeah. So, what was our reasoning for long-range aircraft? Today's long-range aircrafts, A350 as reference, high cruise mach, just to make it rather fast and to reduce dock times. Very efficient air vehicles. The A350 compared to the former A340 is really an efficient aircraft. It's good, it's perfect for the actual mission. And if you want to reduce the amount of energy and with hydrogen, the volume, as we talked about, is a problem. You want to reduce the energy consumption as much as possible. So one possibility is reduce the flight speed. Going down by Mach 0.1, yeah, it will enhance the flight time, but if you have just direct connections, you lose the connecting flights, would give you an advantage. And the other thing is, could we anyhow increase passenger comfort on long flights? Use hydrogen, more direct flights. That was also part of the project then, to have more onboard services to make revenues for the airlines in different ways. Where would we end up? It looks rather classical. We have an aircraft with a big tube fuselage, two decks. People from Airbus normally don't like it because they just get rid of A380. But if you want to integrate hydrogen tanks, you want to have them as a big bone somehow, just to reduce the skin of the tank, which makes isolation much easier. Because you have to fill in stuff which is very cold, and you want to keep it cold for quite a long time over the flight. The other thing is, we fly slower. Liquid hydrogen minus 270 something, and you have to keep it cold for a long time, at least over the flight. It's less. So why liquid hydrogen? Because it is. Yeah. You have to get it to the aircraft. You have to get it in. If you go to gas hydrogen, you have much higher volume. You cannot compress it that much. And so it sounds dangerous, but when you look at aviation safety things, if you have a crash with a classical kerosene aircraft, you sit within a lake of kerosene. As long as you can walk away, yes. Yeah, I know, but we have to take at least a look into safety things. And kerosene is always a problem when you have any kind of crash landing. With hydrogen, you could go the way that you, well, as soon as you open up the vent, it will rise up as a gas. So, no, of course not, but that's the same for any kind of, so it's just for the crash part. We are not producing a complete, ready blueprint concept. So we just try to figure out what is still needed to be developed. So you have the hydrogen tanks inside. You have a wing which is more optimized for slower speed, so you can go into a natural laminar flow. There are also other factors which are quite promising for these kind of wings. That's why we didn't went for blended wing body concepts or just flying wing concepts. Because in the end, the airlines want to use the aircraft where passengers can board rather easily and the operation is still good. You see the wingspan is much higher, but it still fits within the classical box designs from airports. And also the maximum takeoff weight is much lower, so you have a lower wing loading, makes sometimes flying easier in higher altitudes. We always have to compare. That's why we use the A350 as a reference. So with the classical reference, if we, and of course, every technology we introduce, we have to also give our reference aircraft to make the comparison realistically. So reduce the speed, also kind of A350 would gain 10% less energy. And if you put all the other technologies we assume for an aircraft, which was an entry into service in somewhere 2045, 2050, with natural laminar flow, optimal lift distribution, everything else, you would reduce the amount of energy you need, the amount of kerosene, by 35%, hopefully. And if you then put liquid hydrogen on it, you need more energy. You need more volume. So that's why we went into the double deck design, because then you can have a smaller fuselage volume, overall volume. And that would reduce again the energy you need, put on a little bit more of comfort for long flights, you lose energy. Okay. This is a kind of trade-off. We say if we fly with green energy, then we can talk about having a little bit higher energy amount necessary.
So,
yes,
the best we can achieve is -7.
this is kind of, yeah.
The best case
Best
scenario.
case,
The
yeah.
best case scenario.
Yes.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Well, infrastructure change.
Yeah.
Yes. -7%.
Yes, that's the energy you save compared to today's aircraft. But the overall is, this is just on an aircraft level. So the emission reduction on a fleet level is a different topic. This would be a different presentation. But you can say, okay, you have with hydrogen no real CO2, you have lots of other benefits on the NOx side, on things, but there are a lot of water outside. So contracts are a topic for hydrogen aircraft. This is under research by several institutes. The hope is you have a lot of less soot, any kind of particles within your emissions, which normally reduce the contracts. So this is just the hope to reduce by that the additional effect of the water. And when people ask us where to go, this is our actual vision. So we use an aircraft with hydrogen fuel, ultra efficient wings. Also the before presented boundary layer, because now we have a fuselage which has increased volume, which has increased drag. Now it makes even more sense to introduce these kind of integration of propulsion systems. And if you make it in an intelligent way, yes, you have your gas turbines here. What's happening? Okay. You have your gas turbines. Hopefully highly efficient. I'm quite sure Pratt & Whitney, NTU, and Rolls-Royce are working on these things. You could drive this kind of propulsor by an electric engine and produce the electric power, for example, by fuel cells. Fuel cells produce water, water. Could be nice. Either you have to get rid of it just by throwing out of the aircraft, or you bring it to the engine. A lot of engines like to have water within the engine. Reduces the energy you need. These are kind of synergies we try to bring together. There's no, just as a final message, there's no single solution which gives you a clean aircraft for the future. It's just a combination of different technologies which are known. Many of them are known for a long time, and they've been tested, as seen hydrogen tested in the 1950s. But today we might have the technologies to combine these things in the right way. So now open for questions. Yes.
So the technology you're talking about here is using the hydrogen as a fuel in the turbofan.
Yes.
So I guess there's various ways of looking at the crossover point between a hydrogen fuel cell as being the most efficient and then transitioning to a turbofan.
Yes.
Is that a function of distance or
It's a
passenger size?
function of mass. So as soon as you try to get into a classical air transport market of today, AC-20 and bigger,
Right.
actually it's difficult to see pure fuel cell driven aircraft.
So you would see almost a differentiation between the traditional under 100 seat regional aircraft and the single aisle airliners.
I would say for the upcoming 20, 30 years, we don't see the potential that these big aircraft could be driven by fuel cells.
But the
There's a
motivation,
potential for it to scale it up in the future.
but I hadn't seen that thing before, about 16% of the traffic generating 35% of the emissions. So that becomes the big
Yes.
motivator because it's disproportionately weighed on the long haul.
Yeah, and you have to look at time frame for bringing in new aircraft. At the moment, everybody's talking about small to medium range aircraft. So this is the first thing to happen. We will see there for sure a lot of sustainable aviation fuels, which is good for changing things quickly.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only way of getting rid of CO2 emissions within the next 20, 30 years. Because aircraft which are produced today will still fly in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a quick way. The next generation that is going to be exchanged is then long range. Afterwards, the medium and short range entities. And that's where hopefully technology is there to take a look into hydrogen. I know there are a lot of studies saying hydrogen is not well suited for long range. We had long discussions in European research projects on this. There's a McKinsey student study on this. Yes, but we made studies together with the propulsion system people, companies, and overall they agreed it couldn't be feasible for long range to go on hydrogen. If hydrogen is available.
And does the engine have to change, or does the nature of a turbofan engine that burns hydrogen have to be radically different from what?
I mean, here's a real expert, but what people tell us is you might see minor changes on the turbofan, but basically today's engines could already work with hydrogen. But of course, all the infrastructure of the heavy tank system, how to bring hydrogen from the tank to the engine, that's the open part. That's where technology needs to step in.
I'm going to ask one more question. The crossover point between using gaseous hydrogen and using liquid hydrogen, what's the main factor? Is it the aircraft size or the distance? Sorry?
The volume of your energy on board.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see a lot of projects in the regional part using gas hydrogen that might work for this, but as soon as you want to go on longer ranges, you need better fuel, better energy density.
Very conceptual question. I mean, we know that, for example, usage of such big aircrafts was now found to be not so efficient, and market changed. Now you propose within your vision to come back to this usage again.
Maybe
Yeah.
also a mistake of mine. Passenger number here, this concept is much lower than the 380. So we are still in the area of between AC50 and 777.
Yes, but from another side, it doesn't reduce the necessity for the supporting maintenance, operation services, because the size of the aircraft is the same.
Yeah.
And like keeping the aircraft airworthy on the same level. So, do you have a feeling that this may contradict to the vision of the final, like a business model or like an economy model of that?
I mean, this would be another very long presentation discussion on this kind of business models. How to change how airlines are working today. Because today you see a lot of flights in parallel between the same aircraft. Why not trying to glue them together into one aircraft? One aircraft maybe not operated by this airline, but by an operator which is separated into several airline departments. This could be a way of this, but this is rather radical to airlines. If you try the discussions concerning it's getting a long evening.
Okay. And another question, maybe already raised before, do you have a feeling that this shifting of the source of the getting of this hydrogen to somewhere, it's just shifting of the problem? Because we still need to get it from where, and there is still will be a CO2 imprint. So, and this is just shifting of the problem out of the aviation to general economy.
Maybe not shifting out of aviation, but we have to make a life cycle analysis again. Where will you get your energy from in the future? And maybe it's easier, instead of going for typical biofuels, they use your food crops and produce fuel out of it. Even somewhere where you have a lot of sunlight energy and use this for energy production. Yes, it's a transport problem, but you have it anyhow. It's rather impossible to use this kind of hydrogen or some liquid fuel just out of renewable energy somewhere here in the middle of Europe. So you need large areas of photovoltaic, or you need a lot of wind. It might be much easier to use this in areas where we have enough sunlight all day, and then transport it. Even transport of hydrogen is possible. You will lose a lot of energy, yes. We have done a study, which is together with one of the industry partners, that's why I got this data inside, where in the end the sustainable aviation fuel was not really worse than hydrogen. But this is actual point of research. So nobody in aviation is at the moment sure that hydrogen is the way to go. We wanted to see where are the big steps in the game, and then you see a lot of concepts. I think it's a long way to go until there's the infrastructure inside. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry for taking so much time.